In the 1990s, my parents purchased a plot of land in a village close to a city. The land was surprisingly affordable because it was situated just across the road from a cemetery, and people in Eastern Europe are known for their superstitions. Eager to build a large house, my parents wasted no time and started construction immediately. However, during the excavation of the house's foundation, they made a chilling discovery. 3 skeletons, seemingly belonging to a family. 2 adults and 1 child. Rumors circulated that our land had once been a cemetery as well, but the issue was resolved by relocating the skeletons and construction resumed. By the early 2000s, the house was complete, and my parents and siblings moved in. I, however, remained in the city and moved to my grandmother's house for easier access to my studies. Though I visited the new house every week and holiday to be with my family and enjoy my own room on the first floor, an eerie feeling would creep over me each time I ascended the staircase leading to the second floor. I often had nightmares about the staircase, especially the room beneath it, which served as a storage area. These dreams often involved witches and ghosts residing under the stairs, but, being a teenager, I brushed them off. Over time, the feeling of being watched began to haunt me, even in the city. My dad was quite open-minded, so I shared my feelings with him and told him about my experiences with the staircase. His response was unsettling. He revealed that specialists had previously visited the house and informed him that 2 ghosts resided there. This revelation sent shivers down my spine, and we decided not to tell my mother, to spare her from any distress. Fortunately, nothing overtly spooky occurred aside from occasional cracking sounds from the stairs. I tried my best to ignore these occurrences to preserve my sanity. But then, one fateful night, everything changed. On a weekend visit to my parents' house, I had the most dreadful nightmare. Though I could barely recall the details, I distinctly remembered a terrifying creature attacking me. Shaken, I turned on the lights and tried to reassure myself that it was merely a bad dream before falling back asleep. The next morning, I recounted the dream to my father. To my horror, he asked to see my back, and upon inspection, we found it covered in scratches that were beyond my reach. I was petrified. My father advised me to ignore what happened and the feeling of being watched to avoid fueling any malevolent energy. Following that incident, I avoided staying at my parents' house for some time. And as I grew older, the feeling of being watched began to fade. Everything seemed fine for a few years after I moved into my own apartment. Though strange occurrences still happened occasionally, I chose to find logical explanations and not give them undue importance to avoid empowering any entities. One particularly bizarre event involved waking up in my apartment with 5 red toe prints on my arm, despite feeling no discomfort during sleep. I shrugged it off and continued with my life. It appears the entity may be jealous, as it has caused distress to some of my boyfriends. One of them suffered a mysterious burn on his arm after spending the night at my apartment, leaving a perfect circular mark. Another boyfriend started experiencing night terrors when sleeping next to me. Even now, I occasionally have nightmares, but I do my best to dismiss them quickly and not dwell on them. I hope sharing my story won't trigger anything. Wish me luck. This is a true story. It was Mother's Day, and I went with my 5-year-old son to visit my mother's grave. We brought flowers, prayed for her rest, and sought protection from any evil. Everything was calm, and we had a normal day. However, something strange happened afterwards. My son told me something that disturbed me deeply. He said there was a boy watching us, and he was following us. I asked him where the boy was, because I couldn't see anyone behind us. My son pointed with his tiny hand, but I still couldn't see anything. In the following days, life went on as usual. I went to work during the day, while my son attended school. After picking him up, we returned home together. But after 2 weeks, I started hearing my son playing and talking with someone. It struck me as odd, because it was just the two of us living together. When I checked on him, I found him playing with his toy soldiers. When I asked him who he was talking to, he replied, "It's the boy from the cemetery. He says he wants to be my friend." Goosebumps ran down my spine, and I was left speechless for a moment, watching him play and converse with someone I couldn't see. Days went by, and my son's behavior changed drastically. We hardly did anything together, as he spent hours locked up in his room, playing with his invisible friend. His appetite decreased, and his school performance suffered. His teachers even called me in for a meeting due to his lack of attention and falling grades. I decided to take him to a psychologist, but little could be done. The psychologist attributed it to an imaginary friend and diagnosed him with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, suggesting regular visits to improve his condition. However, after 2 months, there was no improvement. Then, one Sunday, my son suddenly returned to his old self. He called me Mommy all the time, wanted to play with me, and even said he was hungry and asked me to prepare something. I felt joy and relief in those moments, and dared not ask about his friend, afraid he might return to his cold behavior. But that happiness didn't last long. That same afternoon, around 6 o'clock, he froze while opening the door, staring at nothing. When I approached to ask what was wrong, his answer was chilling, and still continues to haunt me in my nightmares. My friend went to find his other friends from the cemetery. They're waiting outside, wanting to take me to play in the graveyard, he said. My mind conjured up images of the garden, filled with children who had passed away long ago. coming to take my son away for some inexplicable reason. I closed the door, locked it, and carried my son in my arms, retreating to my bedroom, where we stayed, not daring to venture outside. There were moments when I peeked out the window facing the garden, praying fervently, begging that they wouldn't take my son. Meanwhile, the sound of knocking on the door intensified, as if someone was trying to force their way in. I turned on the TV, raising the volume to drown out the noise. My son innocently approached the window and said, "There's a lady with a stick hitting the children. Look." My heart sank as he describes the exact appearance of my deceased mother on the day of her burial. I'm a male, 34. This happened to me and my brother when I was around 18 years old. Him, 20 years old. Take it or leave it, we both know it to be true. We drove home at about 11 p.m. one night, after visiting a friend on the other side of town. We were sitting in my brother's car smoking a cigarette before we went inside. We lived in an old weatherboard house with a straight driveway about 15 meters long. Across the other side of the road, from our driveway, a 10 feet high brick fence had been freshly painted white, glaringly bright. The street we lived on was well lit, and we lived right next door to a Woolworth's parking lot. The house has now been vacant for a long time. As we sat there, smoking, my brother said to me, "Take a look in the rear view." I grabbed the mirror and turned it towards myself. Standing directly behind the car, just off the boundary of our driveway, was a solid black figure, perfectly contrasted against the white brick fence on the other side of the road. The figure looked to be a female, with a jacket on and hair looked wet. I turned around to look at the figure, and there was nothing there. I spun back around, and the figure was still standing there, in the mirror, faced directly towards us. I turned again to look with my own eyes, and once again, there was nothing there. For a final time, I turned back to the mirror, and the solid black figure was still standing there, pointed directly to us, not 15 meters away. At this point, every hair on my body stood on end, and my mind went into a state of complete confusion, disbelief, and non-acceptance. I jumped out of the car and ran to the spot where the figure should have been. I ran to the fence that is shared with the car park, which was empty, and nothing was on the street. Prior to my brother telling me to look, he had already done his triple take himself. It took me a long time to look at mirrors in the same way again, and this experience totally changed my perception of what we think we know about our existence. I'm thankful for it. What you just heard were 3 real, true horror stories that I hope chilled you to the core. You will find links to the writer's stories and channels below if you want to check out more. Don't forget to subscribe and share this with anyone you think might enjoy a bit of a sleepless night. I do 1-minute horror stories as shorts, which you might also enjoy, especially if you like a chill at night in bed. I hope you're not sleeping alone in the house tonight. And if you are, good luck. Don't forget to check out our other videos. And before you go, are you sure you locked all your doors?